Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart, and today I'm joined by Jennifer Peak. She's the founder and CEO over at the Peak Advisory Group. Today, we're talking about basically avoiding building a huge sales structure and how she's managed to single-handedly within her company leverage partners to create sort of long-term lasting relationships that send her deals on a regular basis. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm really interested because this is your smaller shop, not a ton of salespeople. In fact, you're the sole closer, and you were smart and said, "Hey, I don't want to prospect for myself on a daily basis. I don't want to have to sort of keep that funnel going. What I want is something that's going to send me and bring me deals on a regular basis." And so that's really what we're going to drill in today, is sort of how you got there and how you created those systems and what other people can do if they want to replicate something similar.
Perfect.
Right on. So I'd love to just sort of start us off. Like, how did basically, because what you're doing is, why don't you give us an outline of sort of what you're doing and then how you got to that method?
Sure. So right now what I'm doing is we have a network of strategic partners that are that serve the same types of customers that we do, just at different points in the transactional cycle. So we've developed a lot of relationships with other professional advisors, primarily bankers, attorneys, investment bankers, that we do business with, and that are key elements and key participants in the work that our clients are doing. So most of our clients, I guess by way of introduction to that, are either buying or selling a business. And they're somewhere in that life cycle of needing to get a valuation, needing to get a loan, needing help selling their business, those types of things. So we have a little bit of a closed ecosystem that we work with in terms of getting those transactions done. And what I originally started out doing was trying to find those business owners, either the ones looking to sell or the ones looking to buy, directly myself. And the nature of our work is that we're really a support function to the transaction. And what I found is that people were more coming into the pipeline at a different spot than looking for us. And there was a lot of uphill education that was going on when I tried to make an entry into the market that way. So it took a little while to figure that out. I don't know whether it's good or bad that you have some success at the beginning, but not a lot of success, right? It's tempting because you're like, well, it's sort of working, but it's hard to maintain. And so then I shifted our approach and really started forming these strategic partnerships with these other service providers, because what we do is critical for them to be able to complete what they're doing. They don't have our expertise, and in a number of cases can't fulfill that role even if they wanted to because of independence issues.
Interesting. And so it's a matter of the industry. If I could point to like one of the pieces of I guess one of the pieces that fell into place, or that was in place already, that led to your success with this model, is this sort of, there was a built-in reliance on, or a built-in need for somebody external.
Yes, that's absolutely the case.
Interesting. Okay. And so if we're thinking about how do I replicate this, that's one of those things that you want to keep a lookout for, is like, where am I a required part of the process, as opposed to, gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's a really good way to put it, because my original contacts that I was trying to nurture and get in touch with didn't necessarily understand being a required part of the process. So that was a long road.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot easier if they understand that they need to have you, as opposed to you're a nice to have. Like, hey, this is a value add. This is like the number of times I've tried to build something where you're trying to convince salespeople that, hey, you need to sell more stuff to your clients, and you can still make a margin on it, but here's this whole other need that's sort of adjacent to what you're selling. That's I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's a much harder sale than here's something your clients they already need, they're already asking you for.
Yeah.
But,
And I mean, I think with any sales effort that anyone's undertaking, regardless of where you're doing it, your whole goal is to minimize your efforts and maximize your ROI.
mm-hmm. For sure. And so if we look at the journey, you started sort of on a B2C side, you pivoted towards a little bit more B2B, and now going specifically to these consultants. You sort of recognize that a big part of it was you found a spot where you were a need to have, and your potential customers needed to bring an outside partner for a specific piece. So how did you go about, I guess, finding these vendors, understanding, where you might be a need to have? Like, how did you figure that piece of it out?
So there's a little sort of misstep in the middle too, if you will. And that was when I figured out that we needed to be more B2B. I still didn't have that completely captured. And if you pay attention to the conversation that you're having with people, like in my case, business owners, who would fall back to, yeah, but I already have an investment banker that's representing me, or I already have an attorney that I'm working with. And hearing what they had to say in terms of who they were already relying on was a huge clue as to how we needed to start plugging ourselves into a funnel that was already working. So once we did that, and I think, we all like to think that we're the smartest people in the room sometimes, but really starting to listen to what those objections are. And that's what those were to me, right? Here's the reason I'm not going to work with you. I already have somebody else. And then going to the professional advisors and helping them understand how we could actually make them more successful was the biggest element. But it really started with listening in those first conversations.
And so I guess what did you hear in those first conversations that really put you in this direction?
So the most direct ones were, I already have a business broker, I already have an investment banker. My attorney is handling all of that. Okay, well, that's really good to know. I am thinking about doing something related to my business in a year or so. I'll be back in touch. Mm. In a year or so, they don't really remember me. And I could have a whole bunch of nurture sequences trying to get them to remember me. But what worked better and really gave us more leverage was to go directly to the attorneys or the investment bankers. So not only when Joe decided to sell his company in a year, all the other folks in the meantime, we also had an opportunity to work with.
Gotcha. I like it. Okay. And when it came to building, so you recognize, okay, here's the need and here's sort of where we fit into that equation. Now that you have that, like, what was your strategy for going out and actually putting the rubber to the road and saying, I think that this is something that's going to work and scale as a customer acquisition channel. What came next?
So there was a couple of things that came next. I think anybody who is in sort of a professional service space, like you're not selling a widget, getting as much concrete evidence as you possibly can to demonstrate your work product, for lack of a better way to put it, is always helpful. Mm-hmm. So that was a big thing for us, right? Case studies, sample reports, any sort of examples that we could use that were industry specific or business specific. That was a really big element. Some of it's through handouts, if you will, and some of it's just through conversation. But that's, I think, a really key element when you're in any sort of a service industry. So that was one big thing that we did, was making sure that we had really good examples and a variety of them. Right? So different sizes of business, different industries, different types of work and transactions. That was very helpful. The other thing was really being diligent about identifying the other professionals and experts that aligned with the types of companies that we work with. So we specialize in manufacturing, distribution, and construction. And we work best with other professional advisors that generally work with the same types of clients. So we got pretty specific about, here's my 30-minute phone call to make sure we want to have some sort of a longer-term meeting or do a follow-up with the case studies. But if we're talking to somebody that specializes in medical practices, that's probably not a great fit.
Gotcha. And so it's really like honing in on the niche of here's who we can effectively serve well, having that sort of documented proof, especially for a services business, and then sort of understanding where it is we fit in the equation, in their equation, in terms of accomplishing that goal.
Yes.
Perfect. So once you've got those things nailed, what comes next?
So what comes next is, the sort of the classic nurturing. From our perspective, we find that if we can identify a potential opportunity to either work together or make a referral or a recommendation to, that's really the biggest measure of our success. Those are the relationships that then continue on easily. That's not always possible. We're kind of an event-driven sales cycle.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things that we definitely try to do right out of the gate. And even in that initial conversation, what are you working on that I can help you with? Is there a resource you're looking for that we may have access to, even if it's not us directly? How do you get a quick win is probably the best way to say that. And so that's what we look for the most. Lacking something like that, then we go into a process where we're still identifying opportunities to work with those connections and staying in touch at least on a quarterly basis.
Because I imagine so staying in touch is super important. We're going to talk about a little bit how we keep it regular.
Yep.
But uncovering, there's so many of these relationships start off as just this fantasy of, hey, we can bring each other so much business. And it's nailing the discovery of that first opportunity. That's key. And I feel like there's probably a window of between opening up a relationship or creating a relationship and creating that first opportunity. And if you don't really generate something in either direction in the first 30 days, it could be 60, 90, X number of days, the relationship's going to fizzle. Right. And you're going to need to sort of reinvigorate it. Like you said, they're going to forget about you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, the challenge with quote unquote networking and business development is that at least in my city, right, you could breakfast, lunch, dinner, and coffee and happy hour your way 5 days a week and make really no meaningful business progress from a sales perspective. So getting that traction is critical. And I think a key element of that is being very deliberate about identifying sort of what your food chain is, where you fit into it, and how you can add the most value. Because when you do that, the reality of being able to identify those opportunities is a lot greater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know our experience is different. I had built a web of similar sort of referral partners. Basically, in a previous life, I sold diesel generators, and really in my last role, I didn't sell a ton of them. I rented them primarily because it was sort of like SaaS. It was monthly recurring commission, and that was just such a great revenue base to build a commission check on. I didn't have to go hunting I spent my previous role hunting, a year and a half for a $20 million sale. And then you just watch your margins. And what we kind of realized was, hey, we don't need to hunt these big ones. We can just hunt for these temporary contracts. And where are these temporary contracts? Well, it was with all the different rental shops. It's like, okay, well, where in the value chain can I fit in? And it was the understanding of power, right? These rental shops, they had generalist knowledge, but they didn't have specialist knowledge in terms of power. If you're trying to get into dealing with anything like harmonic loads or, frequency imbalances, or I think that's not even a real thing. Harmonic loads is certainly one. But there were certain voltages that needed to be handled in certain ways. There were certain basic calculations on how to size a generator to make sure that you're getting like the best fuel usage, to make sure that your equipment isn't having any dropouts or anything like that. That was the stuff that I knew fairly well. And I learned all that on the job by sitting down with our engineers. And the moral of the story is these generalists didn't have that knowledge. And the way that I was able to get that first opportunity is I would go in there and I would work on deals with them, even if it wasn't one of my units, and I would help them size it. And I just became this helpful resource. And that sort of helped it created this relationship in addition to the coffees and beers and donuts and lunches and all of that. But it was that I was genuinely helpful, and it didn't really matter if they didn't get the deal, if they used their own units or whatever it was, is I was there to be a resource for them. And they knew they could text me or call me whenever and say, hey, I'm trying to size up this application. Can you give me a hand? And I wouldn't, one, I would get them the right answer. And if I didn't know the answer, I'd get one of our engineers on the line. And so now I'm this I may not be the expert, but I'm a conduit to an expert that they wouldn't have through their organization. And I feel like that was a really important step, at least for me. That created this, everybody phoned Collin when they had a problem with power or when they had a tricky one.
Yeah, I think positioning yourself as that go-to person, even if you're not the end-all be-all solutions provider that they end up spending money with, is really critical, because then you're creating the know, like, and trust factor, and that you're going to give them good advice, and that's very comforting, I think, for lots of people.
Mm-hmm. And so when you look at, if I take it a step up a level, because I think it's one piece to sort of, I think you can use that position as an expert to create that initial relationship in the absence of a sale. But really it's that first sale that turns this into a business relationship. Now there's something here more than just fiction. And so what does it look like? What goes into it, in addition to the sort of, hey, I'm an expert, what goes into earning that sale on your side?
So there's really a couple of things. Once you get past the opportunity is a good fit scenario, what goes into earning that sale is really making sure that the solution being provided is what is not only going to enable our direct customer to be successful, but their other advisor to be successful. So in a lot of cases, even though we're just getting paid by one party, we have two different audiences for our work. And we want to make sure that it's not only meeting the needs of, say, the business owner, but it's also meeting the needs of the investment banker or the attorney. And so being able to kind of speak up and down the process is really important. For the most part, our business owners are only going to go through this once in their professional life. Mm-hmm. And and as they should be, right? They're nervous about it. It's a lot of money, generally. It may be the biggest financial decision they ever make. So really being able to speak to them in a way that they understand, and not just a trust us, we know what we're doing way, but let me explain how this process works and use some analogies to help you understand context. And then also making sure that it really meets the professional expertise requirements of whoever's helping them on the other side. So we found that to really be a big deal. Early on when we started this framework, I wasn't as good about managing both audiences. And so that was a learning right out of the gate about being able to do that. So that's because then because no one wants to get to the end of the project and be like, holy crap, that's totally not what we needed. That's not good for credibility. It's certainly not good for margins. And it's not the best foot to start off a relationship on. So.
Totally. So making sure you're scoping it correctly, making sure you're doing outstanding work. And I think, like you said at the top of the episode, having those documented case studies, work proofs that says, here's exactly what you're going to get and here's exactly what who we're a great fit for. Knowing that is going to help keep, prevent you from getting to the end of the road and saying, oh, actually, this isn't going to add any value, or even worse, doing the work and then torching one of those relationships.
That's right.
Yeah. And so when it comes to sales like this, are you seeing, are these sort of faster closing? Are they slower closing, because of the relationship? How does the relationship play into the sale?
Well, honestly, so, there's a couple of interesting ways. First of all, it makes it the sales cycle, my gosh, sometimes I don't even think you can call it that. It's more like, John told me to call you, so I'm calling you. And here's what I need to have done. And I'm like, okay, I'll send you over an engagement letter and off we go. And it can be, that doesn't even feel like a sales conversation to me. Yeah. So, in some cases we have people who are gathering data from different service providers and that's fine. And, some of those we win, some of those we don't. But the process is still very short. And it is more about talking about the solution and our approach to the solution than it is getting into a conversation with them about why they need it at all.
Mm-hmm. It's almost as if you're entering halfway through the sales process.
That's right.
Because you've identified somebody, a partner that is going to, where there's an opportunity, where there's a need that is unsolved. And so through their sales process or through their, production process or whatever it is that, they're moving a customer through, they recognize that, hey, there's an opportunity. There's a thing that we need to get done. Jen can do this thing. Yep. Here you are. And so you're stepping in. You don't have to do any selling in terms of, here's why you need to do this thing. Here's why this thing is important. You step in and say, so-and-so said you needed this thing. Is that true? And they're like, yep. Like, great. We do that thing very, very well. And then the assumption is there that, well, because so-and-so sent you, they obviously have worked with you in the past and there's a relationship, et cetera, et cetera. So they're like, okay, great. I have this thing I need to do. Let's get it solved.
Yes, that's a very good way to put it. The other thing that, and this jumps back a little bit, but in terms of what we were just saying, it reminds me that, I want to make it clear that we have also over time honed the services that we offer, and have had to go back to our referral partners at times and say, hey, here's an update on what we're doing and how we work and the types of businesses that we're working with, because there are times when it will become outdated. Even if you're doing ongoing work with those referral partners, they don't, it's not their job to keep up with everything that's going on in your business. So there's a lot of value, and it's a reason to reach back out to them, right? To have those conversations and those touch points.
Which is a great point, because if you just have one sale, right? We're not looking for just one sale. We're looking for a great deal of sales on a regular basis. So how do you keep, what are some things other than, in addition to, keeping them updated on the services, what are other things you do to keep those relationships alive so that you're always top of mind?
So we do some of the standard stuff, right? The quarterly outreach, the lunches, the coffees. The other thing is that people move around. A lot of our referral partners are not business owners, right? They're experts inside of a larger company. And so they change firms, they change companies, they seek out new opportunities. And so also being aware, which, LinkedIn and Facebook are great for that. But being aware of people moving around and using that, something that's changed for them as an opportunity to reach back out. I know people do that with us. I've changed. I'm with a different bank now. Let's catch up. So I think there are those event-driven elements that you can look at as well. And then, the other thing is, if you have something unique that you see, even if it's just an interesting tidbit, I know it sounds corny and kind of standard, but it's a good way to reach out and find a reason to talk to somebody. The other thing that I have happen quite a bit is that I will be talking to somebody that I work with frequently, and they will have talked to somebody that I don't work with frequently, and then that infrequent person's name comes up in conversation, and that's a good excuse to reach out and say, hey, I was just talking to Susie, and she mentioned that you guys had lunch together or something like that. And so that's worked really well because it's a little bit more organic, because you're out there in the world doing things. So.
Okay. And so that's just it's sort of like that 6 degrees of separation piece.
It is.
Just sort of mapping, okay, well, who's close by this individual? Oh, let's have a chat about them. Okay. And then sort of it either comes up naturally in conversation, or, hey, you've got a reason to reach out. I was just having a chat with Jen, and I'm going to talk to now the person that introduced us.
Yes.
Say, hey, let's catch up.
Yes.
Cool. And then I think the last piece that's probably the most obvious is just, I think you said you just do great work.
Right.
And that in itself, is that bringing other referrals, or is that just solidify the partner relationship?
It does both. So one of the things that does start to happen is that, and we've seen this happen quite a bit, almost to the point where you're like, I don't even know who referred you. That you just mentioned a name and I don't have any idea who they are. So, as you build that network based on your expertise in doing good work, part of what happens is it just kind of gets out there in the world. But, I'll have somebody cold call me and say, hey, I have this report that you did. Where did you get that?
Yeah,
which is a little freaky. I mean, as much as you want to put all of the disclaimers on everything that you do, the reality of it is your work does get out there in the world. And people have called us and said, I've seen really good things from you. Or I was talking to, so we may be introduced to a business owner by virtue of our referral partners. And then that business owner refers us to one of their friends.
Gotcha.
So, certainly things like that happen as well. But, far and away, a lot of it just comes back to, when you do good work, not only do the people that you're working with want to come back to you, it's easy for them to recommend you as a resource.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is it doesn't just fall into the do good work category, but it's the communication that goes from, the very start of the relationship all the way through doing good work. It's if you're doing good work, but you're not a great communicator with that client, if you're not keeping them in the loop so they can keep their people in the loop, this is probably going to be one of those relationships that fizzles, right? I imagine at least I know for me, just over communicating was what kept a lot of these relationships alive. If somebody was because somebody's relying on me, somebody's job site's relying on me for power, right? And, I had a bunch of referral partners, and they would put their names on the line because they knew that if something went wrong, that Collin would take care of it. Right? I imagine it's the same with you. It's not just about the great quality work. It's about, it's going to be done on time. There's no inconsistencies. You're not going to just ghost and go to Hawaii for 6 weeks and not tell anybody.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, really important point because, I think there's a tendency for all of us to kind of revert to I'm busy, I'm just going to put my head down and get it done. And not seeing that communication as a key element of the project itself. I think that we all want to think that if we don't say anything, then everything's going well, but that's not how the people on the other end of it feel. They feel like if they're not hearing anything, nothing's getting done.
Yeah.
They don't know that it's on track. It's
the duck on the water pond, or the duck on a pond, problem is from the top. Yeah. It looks like the duck is just slowly moving, but you look underwater and the feet are moving like crazy.
Exactly. So there's definitely, communication, regardless of where you are in the cycle and the relationship and the process is critically important. And As much as I've said about the sales cycles being short, I don't want to gloss over the fact that some of the strategic partnerships we have taken years and years and years to build.
Seems like one of us, maybe it's me, maybe it's Jen. Hey, there's Jen again.
Yep.
You were just talking about like maybe as the sales cycles, and maybe it was mine. Zoom's telling me my connection is unstable now.
Yeah.
So you're just talking about sales cycles, and maybe as short as they are.
Yeah, as short as the sales cycles may be for projects, when you actually get a good referral partner, don't underestimate how long it can take to get the referral partner relationship. So, that's where your time investment is,
mm-hmm.
and what allows this start to have a life of its own.
For sure. So if I were to, and I love that, I think I totally agree. If I were to summarize basically the whole process, we start with identify an area, identify a gap in a business's customer life cycle that they can't serve or that they need to bring somebody in. And it's something that either your product or your service does exceptionally well, right? So that's step one, is like, let's find a part in that process where we fit in naturally. Number two is we need to find the individuals or the companies within the companies that have those or that are providing those products and services, and then the individuals responsible for, managing the customer relationships and finding and filling those gaps. The next step is building relationships with those individuals that have those gaps, and establishing ourselves as one, somebody that they know, and two, believe can do the work because we have the case studies and those proof points. And then the third piece is just making sure that we act as a resource for them if they have questions, because chances are they're generalists and we're specialists. So finding a way to edge our way into their process and become sort of, even if it's a part of their delivery process for something that we're not billing for, just having that conversation, giving them free advice, because we know that all of that free work is going into generating this relationship. Then it comes down to, this is where we put where rubber meets the road, which is making that first sale, and then the communication throughout that sale and through to making sure it's not only done well on time, but the communication is solid throughout, so that there's a high level of trust that, hey, this is somebody I can rely on to get things done, and I'm not going to have to worry about, is it on track and off track, because they're just going to take care of it. And that's the sort of discovery to impressed life cycle that you need to walk each one of these through, and then keep it regular by your standards, sales stuff, dropping in for lunch, having the conversation, sending them the good stuff, connecting with them on LinkedIn, watching for job changes, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Jen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Want to give you a chance to promote yourself, and we do it in the most sales podcast way possible. So let's cold call.
All right.
So set the tone here. Who are you calling? And so I'm assuming you're going to call, I'll be a potential partner.
Yes.
Of yours. So what do I look like? What kind of company am I?
So you're an attorney that specializes in, business transactions, buying, selling.
Perfect. Okay. And how tall am I in this role play?
How tall do you want to be? I don't know how tall you normally are.
I'm normally 9 feet tall. So let's do something more reasonable.
You'd be like 6'2".
There we go. Perfect. Okay. Ring, ring. Hey, this is Collin.
Hey, Collin. It's Jennifer Peak with Peak Advisory Group. How are you today?
I'm good. How you doing, Jennifer?
I'm good. Do you have a couple of moments? I'd like to talk to you about some ways we might be able to help you be more successful with closing some transactions.
What transactions are you referring to?
Well, my understanding is that you specialize in helping business owners buy and sell their companies.
Yep.
So we have worked with a number of attorneys, investment bankers, and commercial bankers to really support the back office part of the process. And we have found that makes the deals go much more smoothly and actually get to a closing. Does that sound like something you might need help with?
Definitely does.
So I don't want to take more of your time than necessary today. We have some case studies that I'm happy to send over, or I'm happy to come into your office and walk through that a little bit more specifically. What would work best for you?
It sounds great. You get the meeting. All right. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
So the best way is you can just go to our website, which is Peek advisory.com. There's the contact method there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and it's Jennifer Peek, Peek. And I'm on LinkedIn, and feel free to reach out and connect with me.
That sounds great. Right on. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, and thanks everybody else. We'll see you all next week.